Now, Emily discussed chapter 6, and she wrote something that was very interesting. Everybody, by the way, pay attention, okay? Because in your final summary, I'm going to check to see what you learn from all these other students, okay? So I want you to take good notes and so you can learn. Now, there was an interesting claim in chapter 6, okay? So many Japanese and Korean government officials claim what in chapter 6? They claim that we need to establish comfort women stations because why? Anybody? Besides Emily? Come on! What is the rationale for establishing comfort stations? What is the rationale for establishing comfort stations? Is it to be evil? How come the screen doesn't work? It's not to be evil, right? What is the rationale? Okay. Let me ask people in the back. Okay. Hold on a sec. Emily, can you come up and explain? Okay. Or point to somebody. Okay? It's okay. All right. Why don't you first point to somebody, and then if they don't know, then
No, I wouldn't do that. That's just mean. I'm sorry, everyone, that I'm here again. Hi. Yes, it says here somewhere. Yes, sex was considered a need that the soldier had, and if they were not satisfying this need, they would rape local women. That's the answer. Yeah, that's it. They thought that. Thank you very much. No, but they thought that if the soldiers didn't get sex, they would become crazy animals who would just rape everyone, because apparently men are stupid and animalistic and can't control themselves. That's basically what they think about men. And I don't. So that's what I said.
Sure. And so, okay. So do you understand the claim? So the claim in chapter 6 by these government officials in both Japan and Korea is that we need to establish comfort stations, otherwise we're going to have more sexual violence rates against local women. Okay? And I said that is actually a very interesting question. Okay? And that's actually a very common argument. And so for you, if anybody is interested in this topic, please, for extra credit, please find high quality publications, pro and con, for this claim. Okay? So I did a quick 10-minute search, and I found some high and low quality articles. Okay? So for example, let me see now. There's so I just Googled it. Okay? And then there was this one paper from this study in Maryland, blah, blah, blah. There was an article from the National Bureau of Economic Research. That's pretty high quality, okay, which argues for this claim. And then there was another paper from this guy, Independence guy. But it was only 3 pages, no literature review. It was basically just correlations, okay? And so that's what? This is it. So I say no A for you, okay? Because we talk about this, right? It's correlation is not necessarily causation. Do you understand? You have to explain to me. Anyway, so try to find high quality sources. Now, let me actually ask the men and women of this class, okay? Who agrees with the claim that, if men can buy cheap sex, they're less likely to commit sexual violence, to rape women? Okay? Who agrees with that claim? If men can access to cheap or free sex, they're less likely to commit sexual violence. Okay? Who says yes? 1, 2. Okay, I'm asking. Who says no? Oh, let me do men first. Okay? You have to choose yes or no. Okay? Men. The claim is that if men can have free or cheap access to sex, then they're less likely to rape, to forcibly rape women. Okay. want to get a male perspective and then a female perspective. Okay. Okay, wait. So let's first do yes or no. Okay, who says yes? The crane is one, two says yes. Who says no? No, men first. One. How about you? Okay, let me say it in English and then Korean. Okay. So the claim in chapter 6 in Sarah So is that, well, the claim from government officials in Japan and Korea is that we need to establish comfort stations, Myangu. So soldiers, American soldiers, or foreign so soldiers will not commit rape. Okay? 그래서 위안부 있으면 군인들이 일반 사람들 rape하지 않는다고. Do you agree with that claim or disagree? Disagree. Okay. Now, you said it's obvious, right? So why do you say yes? Yeah, it's my opinion. Okay. Wait, stop. Okay. All right. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Patrick.
Yes, Patrick.
Okay, from Germany.
Okay.
So, if there's a rapist, right? If he has no desire for sex, then he's not going to rape anyone.
Okay.
That's why I thought it was obvious. I don't know.
Well, maybe you should say rapist. Okay.
Because obviously not all men are rapists.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What do you?
But
I know, but women would have your chance second.
No, but it was
Okay.
just because
did I misunderstand it or
but
something?
it's like the thing more is like if he had this guy that had the chance to buy sex, then he wouldn't rape her.
Well, let's say he has free sex.
What the?
Then he has, like for example, if he has a wife, he doesn't need to go out and rape anyone. You know what I mean? I kind of see it like that.
Okay. Anyway, let's first get the male perspective, pros and cons, and then we'll go to the female perspective. Yes. So why do you say yes? You're arguing that. So the claim is that if you establish comfort stations, it's going to reduce the percentage of rape. Okay. You think that's right?
I don't support prostitution, but
Okay.
the true thing is that the human being is an animal. But
Okay.
we're a rational animal, so we can think, we have moral, we have thoughts. But as animals, we have desires. We need to eat. We need to reproduce. We need to do certain
Yes,
stuff.
I know that. So
But at the end, what I want to say is that I can understand the claim that if the soldiers have like the possibility to fulfill this sexual desire, they're gonna be able to do the things that they're supposed to do instead of thinking on raping people,
I
something
understand.
like that.
Anyway, we said correlation is not causation, right? So, because what happened was that in Japan, at first there were hundreds of rapes every day, okay? And so the Japanese government set up the comfort stations, and then the incidence of rape dropped. So there is a correlation, but it's not necessarily causation. Maybe other things led to this drop in rape, this rate, okay? I need to first go to the women. Did you have a quick question? Or, okay. All right, now, the man who said no. Okay, so the counter argument is that no. These comfort stations or providing sex to soldiers will not reduce rate. Okay? Why do you say that? It's not going to have any impact? 별로 차이가 없는 것 같아? 아니면 잘 모르겠어? 왜냐면 counter argument는 그 위안부 있어도 the counter argument is that even if you have comfort stations, even if you do provide official sex, it's not gonna reduce rate, okay? Criminal rate, okay? So that's a counter argument, okay? Let me first get you. You think it's not gonna reduce rate?
No, I think there's no kind of relation between having an official conversation and stopping soldiers from doing some crimes, because that's wartime, right? So the soldiers can be very stressed out. So
Well, the Japan case was afterward.
afterward.
Right, and also in the Korean government case. We talked about there were three levels or three time periods of components. Right? There was wartime component,
Yeah.
1945, and then there was post-war component in Japan, and also in Korea. Okay? And one of the rationales, the main rationale
I believe so. But, yeah.
Why?
Plus,
Because whenever you have a claim, you need some logic, you need some supporting arguments and evidence, right? So what is your supporting argument? Why would it not be
because I think it's kind of little psychological terms.
Okay.
So when they're just saying that there's something that not belongs to you, and it's just right here.
Okay.
So there's more thrill that if somebody just snitch.
Oh, so you're saying that illegal sex is more thrilling than legal sex?
Yes, and the subject is soldiers, right? So the soldiers can be whatever the wartime or not. They are very kind of in the restricted area with the firm orders,
Okay.
like the military cultures. You know. So in the condition like that, the soldiers or any people would be appreciate more freedom or like.
Okay.
But that's not the nature of human that wants to do something wrong and feel some thrills from it. I do.
Okay. But do you think military culture is like that you can just, exploit women? Okay, right. Because if I remember the rules, it was kind of like for the governments that did establish comfort station, the rule was that, you can have sex in the comfort station, but if you go out and rape like civilian women, you'll be severely punished. And we still have that rule today, right? We still have incidents of like American soldiers in Japan and Germany, right? And so if they meet like comfort women, then the government kind of looks the other way, right? But then if they do like forcible sex, like rape, then the soldier is severely punished. That is a rule today, right? And there was a rule back then too. If the regulations are followed, sometimes like when civil society collapses, regulations are not followed. Anyway, so I got the guy's perspective. Okay, now the woman can talk. Let's have a quick vote. Who agrees with the claim in Chapter 6? This is not Sarah So's claim. This is a government official's claim that having comfort women stations will reduce rape. Who says yes? Who says no? Oh, the vast majority says no. Why do you say yes? Yes.
I think yes, because I think it works after the same principle as prostitution, I think. And I think that if you make something available to people, they are more unlikely to just take it. And I think, okay, I don't know how to reason for this, but I just think that men have instincts, kind of, and they just need to do that, and they.
It's kind of like an argument for legalization.
Yes,
right?
basically.
That's fine. I think Emily wanted to say something. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, you said that. The claim says that it's going to reduce, right, the rape and
Right, it's not going to eliminate it, but reduce it.
reduce it. But so far as I read the Comfort Women and we talk the book and we talked during the classes, I think that many times it was said that they were in the comfort stations, but they were also raped. They said they were raped. So actually, the rape is just in the other place. It's happening in the other place. It's just to like the other just the thing is that then the praise are the like lower class women mostly. So, but the rape still is happening. It's just that you call it the other way. They called it the other way. They called it the comfort station, but still women were raped. Nothing changed in that then.
But do you think, like outside of the conversation, the race will reduce? Or do you
But
think
how does it matter? It's still because still the certain amount of women are raped. I'm not saying that maybe all of them. I don't know. Maybe some of them wanted to become prostitutes, and I agree with that. But I mean about women who now say that they were praised of that. Then for me that's not the problem if they were raped if there is, it's minimized like outside. Because yeah.
That's fine. So she's saying we have to make a distinction between. Well, you heard what Emily said, right? So, okay. All right. Does somebody else have a point? Anyone another paper to discuss? Thank you. Somebody besides, somebody who hasn't talked yet. Okay, you haven't talked yet. That's okay.
I just want to say that I believe that you have freedom to the point that it hurts another person. So if it hurts the other person, like for example, if you have a wife or whatever, husband, I suppose it's okay, unless the one of the person doesn't want to. It's also rape. Like, so I can imagine that a lot of people think like it's like instinct and those kind of things. You have those feelings, but to a certain point, I also think like, yeah, but I really want to eat that kind of fruit, or I really want to have a radio. And to a certain point, it's also a really big desire because you want something that's, for example, socially accepted, and that's also an instinct that we want to be part of a group and that we want to be accepted. And then I think like, yes, but it doesn't. It's an excuse to steal that, for example. And I understand that like. Instinct from your body, like physically, is a little bit different from psychologically, but yeah, that's what I think.
That's fine. We have 3 other papers, so we need to move on. But I just have a quick policy question. Imagine you're the Japanese government, 1945. Okay, so hundreds of your local women are being raped every day, and then some of your policymakers come to you and say, I heard about this claim. If you establish, then maybe we should establish comfort stations. So, if you're the policymaker in 1945, who says yes to establishing comfort stations? Who says no to establishing comfort stations? Who says yes? Imagine you're the Japanese government official in 1945, okay? And then the American army has come to Korea, okay? And now you're hearing reports of hundreds of women, local women being raped every day, okay? And so you have a proposal that we need to establish comfort stations ASAP in order to reduce rape. Okay? You have to make a decision very quickly. Okay? But then you hear this counter argument that no, it's not going to reduce. Okay? Or it's going to cause other forms of injustice. Okay? So you're hearing counter argument versus counter argument. But you have to decide, you're a policymaker. Okay? So who says yes to comfort stations? Who says no? Oh, still a majority no. Okay. Anyway, but you're the policymaker, so that was your choice, okay? So, anyway, if you're really interested in this topic, write me an essay, okay? Okay, sure. Yeah, I know, that's a stereotype, right? Like, if men are lonely, they go to comfort stations. Women are lonely, they shop or eat chocolate. I'm just saying that's a stereotype. Right. Yeah, like when I get lonely, that's why I always bring this. It makes me feel, it warms my heart. Okay. All right. Now we need to move on. So again, these are very, controversial, but these are very important. These are very important issues in international politics. Okay. So try to give me strong arguments, pros and cons, and then give me the, strongest evidence you can find. Okay. The other paper was. Okay, Mr. Lee, come on up. Okay. So we talked a little bit about this last week, right? We talked about the Kijichan, okay, the comfort women stations in Korea, how they were kind of covered up, but now it's becoming a big issue. Let me see now. Okay, all right. Did you see the comments that I gave you? 봤어, 안 봤어? Okay, and so I guess so. Basically, first summarize your essay for us. Okay, you're saying like so there was Kiji-chan, Park Jung-hee. He banned prostitution. At the same time, he established comfort women stations, right? And then go on. 뭐 다른 거 말할 거 있어? Or that's it?
That's
Okay. He's a very quiet man, okay? And then I gave him some critiques, which is that, he said that according to Hangere Shimun, why comfort women stations? Because who wanted it?
it's a little bit problem. U.S. Army want to make comfort woman camp
Okay.
in near U.S. camp, and then Korean government want to money, and they don't want to decline U.S. Army in Korea.
Okay.
So the Korea government allow prostitution in near U.S. camp, and Park Chung established them.
That's fine. I think that was a good summary of Hangare Shimun, okay? But again, like if I want more, for more points, you always have to what? You always have to link to. I always want your essay to link to the what? To the class readings, right? So you're saying that Hangare Shimun says this. What does Sarah So say? Do they agree, or do they say different things? Okay.
Sarah So introduced about this, and then in the book, mainly the contents were similar.
I think most of it was similar. The only thing that I thought was different was that when you say was U.S. military's demand.
This is
was it like official demand, or was it just from the soldiers?
It's in the soldier.
Okay.
In Korea, U.S. Army in Korea, 1962. They at the time, U.S. Army and Korea President of Gyeonggi-do.
Okay.
They discuss about the comfort woman.
So it was a governor of Gyeonggi-do, one of the regional governors.
Yep.
And then you're saying that like the 뭐지? 여기서 해도 봐. Yours. But was it the leadership of the U.S. Army that demanded the comfort stations? Or do you understand? Right. Because in chapter 6, Sarah So, she never mentions it was a leadership, right? Like the official policy of the U.S. Army was not to have Myanmar. Okay? But maybe they just kind of looked at her way. Okay, what does this say?
In 1996, Hugh Harris Army and Mr. Park, the president of Gyeonggi-do,
Okay.
they discuss about comfort woman problem, and then the U.S. Army and Korean people agree about in comfort woman should English conversation and hygienic.
Oh, really?
Hygienic, and if the comfort woman who medical checkup, and they are allowed prostitution. Yeah.
So this was an agreement between the government, like U.S. Army officials, and the Korean government, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then that's actually a very significant claim. Okay, and you can say that maybe this wasn't in Sarah So, but I found from Hangare that there was an official agreement. Okay, and then other scholars will need to clarify that. Okay. Anyway, and also the second claim that you made, which was a little controversial, was that you're saying that in Korea we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the comfort women problem, like what Korean government did, but Japan not so much. Okay. And then I said, because you were right, you're saying it's socially discussed in Korea, it's discuss in the National Assembly, but maybe they don't discuss it in Japan, right? Do you think they don't discuss it in Japan?
What I want to say is, in Japan, another global and another country, they are recognized about comfort women in Japan. But Japan right power and Abe administration, they are not recognized about that.
Yeah, that's fine. But did they discuss it in the National Assembly?
Also discussed in National Assembly.
Right, and also in society, right?
Yeah, but it is not socially decision
It's not socially discussed or decided.
decided in pros and cons.
Oh, they don't. Are you saying they don't discuss the pros and cons, or they? What are you saying? That in Japan they do not discuss it, or they do discuss it, or?
What I want to say is, Japan society and another countries, they recognize about problem,
Okay.
but administration and right power, they
Deny it.
deny it.
But how about the liberals in Japan? They recognize it.
They recognize it.
Yeah, that's fine. But then if you say that if you say that conservatives and liberals disagree, then you can say that maybe Korea and Japan is not that different. Because do you understand? Because you're saying that in Korea we discuss it. There's disagreements between different factions, right? And then you can argue that maybe that's the same thing happening in Japan. Anyway, so my two critiques was that a lot of the media discussion on comfort women is driven by nationalist ideology and low quality research. Okay, so there's a lot of low quality research. So we always have to be careful what the media says. Okay, we talked about this with Seoul, and we also talked about this with North Korea, right? That a lot of times what the media says about North Korea is dated, it's outdated, or it's biased. So we need to be very careful, and we need to try to get first-hand knowledge. Okay, so as a student, you always want to find the highest quality objective scholarship. And that's why I signed the Comfort Woman reading, because Comfort Woman was published by the top press, University of Chicago, and it was highly recommended by the top scholars. Bruce Cummings. You heard of Bruce Cummings, right? Right. He's the most famous historian, also from University of Chicago. But I'm not being biased to my school, okay? All right. Okay. So we consider this book to be a very high quality source, okay? So you want to find other sources which are also high quality. Okay. Now the other thing was that also when you discuss Japan, also look at the pros and cons, because especially like 1990s, it was heavily discussed, and anyway, you read this. You read these comments, right?
Yeah.
Right. So so the government made like the Asian Women's Fund. There's a petition by 1,300 Japanese scholars asking for Japanese government to apologize, compensate more, and so some people can argue that it's actually discussed more in Japanese society than in Korean society. That if you look at Joseon-Ilbo, they don't have any articles on the Kichichon, at least the English edition. And not that many Korean scholars have petitioned the Korean government about the Kichichon or the Vietnamese woman. Anyway, but you can kind of link that to the epilogue in Sarah So, because Sarah So says, she says, if you want to pursue justice, is it a good idea or bad idea to compare different countries? Yeah, she says it's a bad idea, because if you have this argument like which country is better, then it never ends, right? And it leads to this kind of nationalism that my country is better, my country is good, we're the victim, you're the oppressor, and this argument goes on and on. And so she says that to pursue universal justice, it is better to focus on our country instead of other countries. That outsiders cannot change a society. Mainly, it has to come from within, from people inside. And so the question is, how can we outsiders help people in Japan reform their own society, help the reformers, okay? How can we build this kind of social capital and trust? And so more specifically, how can we help actors such as Asahi Shimbun, who is a liberal newspaper, right? And then, that's why you should read Asahi and see how can we help Asahi, okay? And he said that, like, Asahi Shimbun wrote that in Japan, books denouncing South Korea have come into vogue, and also South Korean organizations are building comfort women stations everywhere. And so the Asahi Shimbun says that these are futile provocations that just leads to like just argument, and so it deters us from the real issue, the most important issue, which is relief for victims. So that is their claim. Okay, so if you want to support Asahi Shimbun, then maybe the policy implication is we should have less comfort women statues and more like other things to help Japan like reform their country. Anyway, so that's the claim from like Sarah Sell. Okay, epilogue, and then we can discuss whether you agree or disagree. Okay. Do you think that's right? Do you think that we need to kind of focus on our own country first?
Own country.
Yeah.
Yeah, because own country.
Okay. We need to focus on our own country. Okay, that sounds good. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Did you win your election?
Yeah.
Oh, 축하합니다. Yay! He's our new president. Don't be corrupt. Okay. All right. If you have time, we'll sing for you. Congratulations. All right. What was another? Okay. We also got paper from Miss Wang Mei Ki. Miss Wang, come on up. Okay. All right. So tell us about your paper.
The paper is
Okay, you have the mic.
I'm talking about the present Japanese government is trying to hide the truth about the how is that called dark history of Japan. Not just about the comfort movement, but also the massacre.
The massacre.
Massacre in Nanking. And anything they think is a black history of Japan, they will try to hide. For example, they will try to neutralize Kono conversation in 1993, which is regarded as a formal apology from Japanese government for comfort women. And also they also has publicly expressed their discontentment on the Kono conversation for several times already. On the other hand, Fujioka Nobukazu, a professor of education in Japan, he is trying to persuade every Japanese politicians to remove all the textbook content about comfort women. That means they wanted to hide the truth, and they think these kind of actions can help to restore Japan's reputation in World War II. And also they want to improve the sense of pride of the modern nation's citizens. But what I think is that Japan did something like that will actually negatively affect its image as a responsible partner on the international stage. And even they hide the history, it is not helpful for Japanese to enhance their sense of pride, because there is a lack of historical education. So when Japanese facing the discontentment from the neighboring countries, they even don't know why the neighboring countries will feel so so sad or so unhappy about what the Japanese government do.
Who are the neighboring countries? Who do you have in mind?
China and maybe Vietnam and Korea also. Yeah, but Japanese may not know why the neighboring countries will feel so will have so negative feeling about Japan. Yeah.
That's fine. Anyway, so good essay, but then you saw my feedback, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, what do I always say when you write an essay? You always need to what?
Citation.
Yes, citation. I need to know what are your sources, okay? Because you can make any claim you want, but you need to back it up with strong arguments and evidence, right? And make sure the arguments and evidence comes from the highest quality sources. And then also look at the counter arguments, counter evidence, right? So where did you get all this information from? When you're like
From many news.
like Hong Kong news, Chinese news, what kind of news?
I have seen some BBC news, but I will find it out.
Okay, so find out, right? Because it's the same thing when I told you about the weekly summaries, right? That you can say, it's fine to mention what you think, your opinion, like Japan should apologize, Japan should not apologize, Korea should apologize, not apologize. But I want at least 3 sentences of the side reading. Okay, so you say all these things about why Japan should or should not apologize, and you have nothing about like chapter 6, then you get a low grade. Okay, so I want at least 3 sentences what Sarah So says in chapter 6, and then you can say wherever you want, like the literary way. Okay, I don't care. Okay, but I want at least 3 sentences to show that you actually read, you actually engaging with high quality scholarship. Now, so that's the point number 1. You want to make sure you get the highest quality evidence. And then two is, it is this larger question. I think this one may pose an interesting question, which is how can we persuade the Japanese government, the Japanese people to change, right? To show more sincerity. Okay? And so what is your suggestion? How can we persuade like Abe or the supporters or the Japanese people to change? Okay. And
To persuade the president is almost impossible to do that.
okay, but maybe some of your supporters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because like you can think about what is the current strategy, and then think about how can we change the strategy. Because according to Asahi Shimbun, what is the Korean government doing right now? They're doing the Korean government and also many Korean activists. What are they doing to persuade Japan? They are what? Come on, this was like 10 minutes ago. What are the Korean activists doing? They're establishing all these what? Yeah, statues, right? They're establishing statues in front of basically every like Japanese embassy and consulate and public parks everywhere, including Glendale, California. Okay? And then according to Asahi, Asahi claims that this is a good way or not a good way to persuade Japanese people. Do you remember? Asahi said what? Okay, then ask for help. Asahi Shimbun is a liberal paper in Japan. They say it's a good way or bad way. This is bad way, right? That it portrays like Japan as evil and comfort women as like pure good. And so it makes, well, one is that it portrays Japan in a bad way, and 2 is that there's a lot of Japanese people like in the middle, who are aware of the comfort woman. They think we should act on it, but they don't like how it's portrayed as black and white. Because if you look at has anyone seen the statue? Oh, you never seen the statue? You should visit the Japanese embassy. Okay. Anyways, right in the front, and it's usually like they portray like this. If you went to the dominant narrative is that she was pure and innocent. She was taken away. Okay. But then when we read like chapter 2 and 3, we see the situation is a lot more complicated, right? That we don't know for sure if any woman was kidnapped by Japanese soldiers, because the only evidence for that are some narratives after 1992. Okay, but we do know that some women went there not because they were kidnapped, but because they were like either sold by their parents, or they just left home. Okay, because home was terrible, it was oppressive, they wanted to get away, and maybe they heard offers of this good job, and then they went there, and the job turned out to be sex work. Okay, so they were lied to maybe, but these women felt that there's nowhere else for me to go, and I cannot go back home because I'm a poor woman, and in those days, poor women had no status, no power. So when you have stories like that, which are documented, right? You heard many stories like that, right? Which were documented, written by the women themselves before 92. Then the situation is much more complicated. Okay? So I think maybe so one strategy is acknowledge that stories are very complicated, and it might be easier to persuade the Japanese people to acknowledge the complicated story and to help make these women's lives better. Okay, so that could be strategy number one. Also, it's very important to know, good scholarship is very important because this has direct implications for our society, Korean society. Because right now the dominant paradigm is that the Ryanbu, the comfort women for Japan, they were good and pure, but all the other comfort women, they're bad. Okay, the comfort women for the American soldiers, or the Filipino women now who are servicing the American soldiers, they're bad, right? So you have the Park Chung-hee government, who is right now they're cracking down on prostitution, and any women Philippines, Russia, if they're caught, what happens to them? What happens to these women? Does anyone know? They're basically they're deported. You see? So they're kicked out of the country. And so but if you assume that maybe even in the old days in Japan, maybe the women were, because of economic and social pressure, they felt this pressure to become sex workers. Then the story of what happened in the old days and the story of what happens today becomes more similar. You see? And so then you can feel more sympathy, to these foreign women, that maybe they're not so different from the harmonies back then. And so instead of just deporting them, we can treat them more humanely. So if our strategies change, then not only maybe we can promote more justice in our own society, and also promote more justice in other countries. Yes? It's a euphemistic term for prostitution. Yes, but it's a euphemism for sex workers. Workers providing sex, whether it's voluntary or not voluntary, but we use that term. But what is your question? This is terminology. Okay. We talked about the Ilgon Wianbu and the Japanese Wianbu. No, the Ilgon Wianbu and the Nihon Wianbu, right? And so before 1945 and after 1945, both the Japanese and Korean government used the same term, which was Wianbu, comfort women, to describe these women who service soldiers. Okay. But then after 1992, when you had this political movement, redress movement, the activists for the Japanese Wianbu said that we should not call them Wianbu anymore. We should call them slaves or Jamchinde. Okay, so they differentiated themselves. But people are still kind of contesting what is the right terminology. anyway, so a lot of the activists say we should, so the activists for the household sharing, they basically say we should just use the term slaves. Yeah. Well, okay. Why did the right? I have a question maybe to the Korean. My Korean talk. Yeah. Anyway, well, last week we talked about the terminology because Japanese people say like the women before 1945 they were just prostitutes, they were sex workers who got money. Okay, classic definition. But the Korean activists say no, these were it was not voluntary, they were coerced. Even if they did get money, it was still under coercive conditions. The better come off terminology is slaves. Okay, and so the women in before 1945, some activists call them prostitutes, some activists, some Japanese nationalists call them prostitutes, and some Korean nationalists call them sex slaves. So most of us use the term comfort woman as a neutral term. And so comfort woman captures a wide range. You could refer to just classic prostitutes versus people who are actually like enslaved, coerced. So comfort woman captures both terms. Okay. Right. Well, the question is then how much coercion do we have now? Okay, and then we have some evidence in the 60s and 70s that the Korean government did use some coercive measures, like they recruited the women, they were sick, they put them in jail, but there was a lot of government complicity. Today, government is less involved, but they're more involved in terms of like punishing the women after they're caught, like in terms of deporting them. So the point is that there's always government involvement, but in different ways. So maybe like before 1980s, it was like recruiting the women and putting them in jail. They were like sick, but now it's like not recruiting the women, but raiding the women, and if there are foreigners, putting them in jail and deporting them. And so, people who are like, people who are fighting, people who are fighting for women, people who are trying to advocate for these women say that, we should, protect their human rights and not deport them. Okay? And it's an ongoing discussion. My only point is that this is a reason why scholarship is very important, because if the women before 1945, if they're all the sex slaves, and if they have nothing to do with prostitution, then the women back then were good. The women today, maybe they're morally bad. Okay, so I think this is a dominant paradigm, at least among government officials. The government officials right now they give a lot of welfare and subsidized housing to the pre-1945 women, but the post-1945, either they get no recognition, like the Korean women, or if they're foreign women, they're like, they're in prison and deported. You understand? But if the situation is not that different, if there's a lot more gray area, and if the government recognizes that, then maybe the public and the government may be more sympathetic to what you call, prostitutes or sex workers today. Yeah. Every once in a while, the government raids, especially if there's political pressure. So I think there was like a women's conference, I think in Korea, and I think I remember the Korean government wanted to show their for women's rights, so they raided and deported these women. Okay, so anyway, so okay, good discussion. Okay, anything else? Okay, so my recommendation to you is that again, if you want to make if the interesting question is how can we persuade the Japanese people, one strategy is read more Japanese newspapers, read like Asahi Shimbun, and then see like what they say, and then think about what is the government doing now to persuade Japan? Is it working? And can we think of better ways to persuade the Japanese people? Sounds good? Okay, but the main thing is cite your sources. Okay, anyway, thank you very much. Alright. Yay! Okay, was there anything else? I think that's it for the papers, right? Was there anything else you wanted to share? Okay, if not, then let's go ahead and break into our small groups. Shh! First, go to your original group, and then I want one person to switch. Oh, we did that? Oh, okay. Wrong class. I'm getting old. I need more chocolate. Okay, energy. Okay, then go back to your, go back to the group that we formed on Tuesday. I need one of the groups to come to me. Emily, can you come to me? Can you group to me? I don't think I talked to you. I don't think I talked to you to the group yet. Okay. All right. Yes. Oh yes. Okay. That's right. That's right. Okay. Right. Thanks for the reminder. I got an email from Sarah So. Woohoo! Yes. Because I want all of you guys to be like excellent scholars. That means I want you to write, make good arguments, and correspond, communicate with fellow scholars. So I emailed her, and she replied back to me saying, "Okay, Emily, can you read this?"
Me?
Yes. We'll do first Emily, and okay, actually, let's do this Emily because there's some Korean words. Oh, you're sick? Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead. I am not.
I am not surprised to hear from you that activists for
일본군 위안부
seem to have no connection with activists for
미군 위안부. Okay, go on. As I
discussed in my book, 1662, when the West movement began in the early 1990s, the former, in fact, chose to use the term
정신대.
to refer to the wartime conflict in order to symbolically set them apart from
미군 위안부. In the 1990s, they used the term 정신대, but now they use the term slaves, sex slaves. Okay, I am glad.
I'm glad to hear that your students, especially international students, found my book helpful as they try to understand the conflict between the historical development on the conflict movement and the contemporary politics.
Right. Okay, next. Okay. What's your name? Taeyang. Can you read this? Since my
It would be nice if my book gets discovered by a publisher someday in the future. For now, I think the anti-Japan nationalist paradigm is too solid and cons in Korean society for any publisher to venture into a risky project like translating my book into Korean.
Okay.
I hope you will be able to research more about the nationalist narratives 미군 위안부 versus 정신대. Meanwhile, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yay! Happy Thanksgiving. It was yesterday in America. So anyway, so Sarah So, best wishes, Sarah So, professor, Department of Anthropology. Woohoo! Yes. Anyway, so I thought this was a nice email. She sent it to you, and then I thought it was kind of interesting what she said. One thing is that like she said that my book had little impact because it's published in English, and you know, like most professors here, they don't read English. Okay, it's unfortunate. It's kind of weird, but I think like people study like English super hard, and then once they get a job, they don't study English anymore, including professors. It's kind of tragic, and so. And because like their English is not that good, they have limited access to like the best quality scholarship, you know, such as this book. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that she's having a hard time getting a publisher to publish this in Korean because it's, anything that is seen as like pro-Japanese is very difficult to get published. We had a recent controversy with the textbooks, right? One of the textbooks was saying like maybe like Japan sounds so bad, and so that textbook was rejected. So, you know, we're not going to read that anymore. Okay. And so, yes.
One question. Japan is not so bad. So do you mean that the textbooks are saying that Japan is bad?
So maybe, does somebody know the textbook controversy? Okay. Maybe we can pass the mic. So what was the textbook rejected?
Yes, yes. So in Korea, there's two parts of history books. One is very comprehensive range from the prehistoric period to the like 100 years ago, when before the imperialist Japan colonized Korean Peninsula. That's part one, and part two is from 100 years ago to like 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Okay. So go on.
So the main problem of the textbook was that there's an essay from like some scholars, I don't know, but he or she was saying that we need to see the case, especially comfort woman or like slavery, like in the perspective of Japanese people. So that was the problem to the decider of the textbook, that it might be very harmful to the students, Korean students, to read this and like having different thoughts from the main purpose of education the government wants to educate to students. Yeah, so rejected.
Anyway, so the Korean system is different from Japan. Korean is centralized. You have just one district expert. Whereas in Japan, it's like local school districts. So each local district they can choose. And then I think most of the, it's like most teachers in Japan, like many teachers taught in other countries, they tend to be very liberal. So most school districts they choose liberal textbooks, OCW-HYU. But there might be like a couple of districts which are more conservative, so they might choose a more conservative textbook. But in Korea, there is no choice. The central government decides. And anything that is seen as like pro-Japanese can be very it's very controversial, right? I remember like there was this one nominee for the cabinet, and then he's like a lieutenant, right? He's like an elder in the church, and then he prayed that bad things happen in Korea, Japan colonized Korea, maybe he was a little god. Okay, hopefully we can learn from our suffering and then become a better country. And then because he said that this was like a little god, he was like basically he was rejected. He had to withdraw his nomination. You understand? So I think like statements that might seem like okay from like maybe from like Western perspective, like saying like bad things happen and it's a little god, or maybe we should look at it from their perspective. It becomes very sensitive when they talk to Japan. Anyway, so that's just the background. That's number one.
for Korean language and Korean history, the government has the publishment like authority. However, in other subjects and about recent and contemporary history, there are lots of publishers in Korea. And then each school can choose by their teacher's opinion. However, government can give some regulation for the publisher if they contain wrong historical information or like kind of very subjective, objective, subjective information about history.
Recommendation or just censoring?
Yeah,
Both
of
so
them.
they can regulate or censor?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So it's still more strict than the United States.
Yeah, right. That's
The
right.
United States, like what Japan, the central government cannot handle it. Right? Americans would like rebel. They already don't like the president anyway. So, okay. Well, I guess we. I guess
It's okay if
right.
you want some
Right.
quality of your historical assassination. I mean, I don't think the Netherlands they allow certain activities, but it's only like
Yeah, just opinion.
exactly.
Right.
Or
But
certain
I know what you're saying. You're saying like every textbook there's always some subjective opinions. But so I think good textbooks were say, you don't want to get rid of all subjective, but at least make it balanced. Right. Like present different points, like strongest arguments for and against, right? I think that's probably at least I think the better curriculum. Okay. Before we go to our small groups, does anyone have any final comment? You read The Comfort Woman, right? Very interesting book. Maybe like a title there, any final thoughts? Yes? I think some people propose that the Korean Japan should set up like a joint textbook. But we haven't had any meetings on that. Because right now as you know, right now the leaders of the two governments don't meet. Right? Yes. So maybe once they do meet, maybe that's something they can discuss. So one thing at a time. Okay. So right now, like Park Geun-hye is like, I'm not gonna meet you unless you change your stance on the compound. So that's like a big obstacle. Anyway, so maybe in your small group discuss like the different chapters and also like what some lessons you got from the book. Personally, for me, like after I read the book, I realized that wow, there's a lot of like injustice, and I think that I think for me, like the book taught me that you should not like judge people based on like stereotypes or discrimination. Oftentimes, I think we base people like, oh, they went to like their second line, or they're low status, or they went to a certain school, so they're lower than you, right? Did any of your family members have second line? Like your grandparent? My grandfather had a second line, and I think it was pretty common back then. And they were treated very low. Okay. And then I think even today, so I think if you really like understand like the lesson, I think you really need to have more empathy for even people today, like the Filipino or Vietnamese or Russian women who come here and they work as sex workers, instead of just automatically saying they're bad people. just getting a PhD from American University to like a better teacher or researcher. That shouldn't matter. You know, you should base a person on a good teacher with a good researcher. So the guy from France, is he a good teacher? You know him? Very little. Okay. A little bit. Oh, okay. We need to like give maybe we should give him this. Okay. Or I guess he feels a lot of injustice. Okay. Okay. I guess he's letting all of us know. Anyway, so at least let them know that I'm just saying in general, I totally believe that we should, you know what I mean, right? Go beyond the stereotypes, try to really know people. Yes, and we have the policy. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so let's just go ahead and talk about this for 10 minutes.